Alrighty, everybody, let's talk about the digestive reflexes. Yay, digestive reflexes! Let's map them on the feet first, and we always need to start with drawing our guidelines. The only guidelines that are really important for us are going to be the diaphragm, the waistline, and the pelvic, but let's go ahead and draw the shoulder line guideline just to be nice and all-inclusive. So we have shoulder line, diaphragm, proximal head of the fifth metatarsals, create our waistline, and then our pelvic line. Okay, so those are our 4 guidelines. We now have a pretty good idea of where our digestive reflexes are going to fall. Let's start with the upper digestive reflexes. We're going to use some different colors for each of those. So we have liver, which I should probably draw the gallbladder in first. So we have gallbladder, which is just this little pocket, and liver, which is the big squiggle of purple. We've left this little hole out here for pancreas, which traverses most of zone 3 on the left foot and then a little bit on the right. Then we have the spleen, which is kind of the equivalent to the gallbladder on the left foot. And then we have the stomach. And some of you are thinking, I know I'm reading your minds through the camera, Sam, why aren't you drawing some of the stomach on the right and some of the liver on the left? Also, just so that you know, we're talking about the client's right foot and the client's left foot there. And it's because I've personally found that all of the liver stuff happens on the right, all of the stomach stuff happens on the left. The only exception to this is the pancreas. I find when this spot is super inflamed and then the whole base of zone 3 on the left is inflamed, there's definitely pancreas stuff happening there. That's really what I tend to focus on, is right liver, gallbladder, left stomach, spleen. Although I do recognize that in the body they actually kind of go yin-yang, they kind of complement each other that way. I don't necessarily practice that way in terms of what I've noticed. Okay, so that being said, we're going to avoid the kidney reflexes because they kind of go over on top of all this and get in our way. So let's do the colon reflexes next. Okay, so we have the ascending, half of transverse on the right. We have the other half of transverse, the descending, and what would be the sigmoid rectum flexure, which a lot of people draw in zone 5. I haven't found that to be super accurate, but you know, each map is a little bit different. Then we can just do a therapeutic squiggle for the small intestine because it's kind of all over the place. And that's basically our digestive reflexes. One thing that I would also like to point out is going to be the esophageal reflex, which we'll draw in. We've used up almost every color. We'll reuse green. So from the stomach, I find that it does traverse across diagonally that zone, more so on the left side than the right. That's the only other aspect that I really wanted to drive home. So those are our digestive reflexes, but now I'd like to introduce a concept of through and through to you all because I do find it super important. So we're going to keep our visual of the standard map here, but then we're also going to look at what the zones and digestive reflexes look like from these various angles. So shoulder line, diaphragm line, proximal head, although it's a little bit difficult to see on this angle, behind the malleoli, shoulder line, diaphragm. Perfect. Same thing, come across, go behind. A little bit weird because the ankle is dorsiflexed, but that's okay, we won't hold that against them. Okay, now let's draw the digestive reflexes on the dorsal aspect, because that's always super fun and important. We'll start with our stomach and spleen, because we can see Let's do spleen, or gallbladder rather, zone 3. That's really the only way we can see it on this foot, on that dorsal aspect, but then we can see spleen multiple areas. Spleen here, and spleen here. Remember, it's on the lateral side of zone 3 on the left side. Okay, now let's do liver stomach. So we have large amount of liver on the dorsal aspect. When a lot of people ask me what the anemia bump is, the anemia bump is right here. It's at the base of the liver, often indicating pancreas stuff as well. This is all liver territory. But then if you really wanted to get specific, this is a little bit of spine. And then some pancreas action as well, right here and across here. Pancreas, pancreas. Okay. And then we have the stomach, which is our pinky. Pink, 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 pink. Pink, 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 pink. Yay, stomach. So happy. Okay. Now let's do our large intestine. Large intestine, we have the ascending colon, transverse. I know it's freaking you out. Oh my God, the dorsal aspect. I wasn't prepared for this, Sam. Then we have the other half of transverse and the descending. Then there's that snapshot of the transverse. Then the other snapshot of the transverse and the descending. And then it would even kind of branch off into the heel, the plantar surface of the heel. Then if you really wanted to get specific, this would also continue the lumbar spine. Then we have the squiggle of small intestine, which is all through here. All through here. Because that dorsal ankle represents that deep pelvic core. Same thing with the small intestine as well. I think the only other aspect that we drew on to it was the esophagus reflex, which we can't really see because it's on the plantar surface of the foot. But if you really wanted to get specific, it would be here. Cool. And those are our foot reflexes for the digestive system. And moving on to the hands, let's look at the palmar surface and draw our guidelines. So we're going to start with the shoulder line guideline. Then we'll move to the diaphragm guideline, just below the bunion area of the thumb, right at that metacarpophalangeal joint. Then we have the proximal head of the fifth metacarpal for the waistline. And then the pelvic line. Okay. Those last two are going to be really important for the large intestine reflex coming up. So now let's get to our spleen and gallbladder. So just as a refresher, this is the client's right hand, the client's left hand. Anatomical position gets a little bit tricky. So because this is the right hand, the gallbladder goes on the right, but the fifth vertical zone and fourth vertical zone in between is where the gallbladder is, so we are going to draw it medially instead of laterally because that's where it occurs. Just a little bit of switching it up due to the position of the hand. Same thing with the spleen. So medially between the fourth and fifth digit in horizontal zone 3, that's spleen territory. Moving on to stomach, on the left side, making room for our pancreas, not to overcrowd the spleen at all. Then we have the liver on the right side, making room for the pancreas, which has a more medial insertion normally, but that means it's a lateral on the hands. So leave some lateral space. And now we draw pancreas. Pancreas, pancreas. Yay, fabulous. Okay. Now comes the fun part. We get to work with the large intestine. So, large intestine ascends on the right side, and it ascends normally laterally on the feet, but because we're in anatomical position on the hands, in line with the fifth vertical zone still, but we're going to start medially with the ascending colon and half of transverse. It's a little bit harder to draw on the hands because the zones are so small, just due to the way that the hands are structured. But then we have to go all the way across, starting with the thumb side on the left, and then down for the descending on the left, in line with vertical zone 4 and 5. And if we wanted to draw the sigmoid back to medial, we could. Okay, so a little bit different. Then we have the small intestine. Coloring in the small intestine. Careful not to mix your yellows and blues, because then you get green, and green should not be present in the intestine area. That's going to be for our reflexology soundtrack. Anyway, so those are our core digestive reflexes. Then we'll just add the esophageal reflexes. Speaking of green, take that stomach area and draw that line into horizontal zone 1, and that is the palmar surface of the hands. Now let's move to the dorsal surface of the hands. Go ahead and draw all of our guidelines on the dorsal aspect. Dorsal shoulder line, dorsal diaphragm, proximal head of fifth metacarpal, and line between the carpals. Perfect. Now let's do our, again, so let's look at left and right here. So we have right hand, left hand. So that means gallbladder is going to go here, and spleen is going to go here. Okay. That's going to be our two lovely assistants. And then we have liver, with a little bit of pancreas, and then a lot of pancreas. And then all the stomach. Ooh, and I just shaded all over the poor spleen. Then we have our ascending colon in line with the pinky finger, transverse, and then descending colon and other half of transverse, as well as sigmoid. If you wanted to go there. Perfect. And then small intestine, and small intestine goes something like this. Squiggle, squiggle, squiggle. Squiggle, squiggle, squiggle. And that is that. As well as we have our, ooh, that's purple, that's green. On the left side, our esophageal reflexes. Oh, that's blue. Goodness, oh no. I messed up our drawing, everybody. Where's our green? Our green is here. Boop. There we go. Nobody saw that. Okay, so that would be our esophagus reflexes, and that's the dorsal aspect of the hands, because the hands are through and through, and so are all the other extremities. We need to be aware of that. Now let's move on to the face. Shoulder line guideline. Zygomatic ridge is going to be our diaphragm guideline. Extending the lip line is going to be our waistline guideline. And then that cleft of the chin extended, unfortunately not as good on a 2D image. Much easier to do it 3D. Okay, let's start with our spleen on the left, the client's left, and the gallbladder on the right. Then we'll do our pancreas just for giggles, just a little bit on the right, and then it basically traverses all across the lip line. There's that, and then we have our, let's do stomach first. Pink for stomach. And that also puts all of the upper teeth in the upper digestive space, which I think is really important to note. Then we have our purple for liver. So specifically, right side of upper teeth is going to be liver and gallbladder. Front row of teeth is also very pancreas influenced. And then that left side of upper teeth going to be largely stomach. Now we have our ascending colon, half of transverse, descending colon, and sigmoid if we really wanted to do that. That means that the lower lip and the lower teeth represent the lower digestive reflexes. Isn't that fun? Yay, fun. Okay. Then we could map it specifically ascending colon on the right side, transverse, and then lower descending colon sigmoid on the left. Then all the small intestine glory, which you can barely see, but that's okay. And then the esophageal reflex, we really want to highlight as being from stomach to zone 1. And this is really where I find the digestive reflexes to be super interesting, because that port of that left nostril really represents the esophagus, versus that port of the right nostril would really represent that gallbladder port. Yeah, so I think that that's a fun distinction to make. Now that we're done with face, let's go to the ears. And for the ears, I know that a lot of you who have a traditional Chinese medicine background or have studied auricular therapy do not have this understanding of the ears, but I've tested this multiple times, and it is fascinating to me how every single time I keep coming back to the Western map of exactly how we map the feet, the hands, the face does work for the ears in this way, even though it is totally opposite of auricular work. And that really gives us a really neat conversation to have in terms of, you know, what is influencing other stuff. From the digestive standpoint, my lower digestive standpoint is in the Simbaconcha, or the cavum concha, versus the Simbaconcha, the upper cave, is going to be TCM oriented lower digestive. My upper digestive is going to be in Simbaconcha, versus the upper digestive system is going to be the cavum concha for TCM. So it's fascinating to see how the opposites influence each other, but that gives us an idea of just different schools of thought and practice. Okay, so throwing up our guidelines real quick. Guidelines are going to be the top of the helix, just above the triangular fossa, then just below the triangular fossa at the ridge of the Simbaconcha is going to be our diaphragm. Then our waistline guideline is going to be right in between this ridge, the root of the helix, all the way across between the Simbaconcha, cavum concha, and then at the base of that antitrachic notch, or the intertrachic notch rather, between the tragus and the antitragus, you want to draw a line just to separate the lobe, and that gives us our lower body. So we now have the question of, where does everything go? So our gallbladder is going to be right in here. Our spleen is going to be right in here. Whoop. In that pocket, in that cave. Okay, then we have our liver, which is going to be leaving a little bit of room for pancreas. Fabulous. Then we have our stomach, leaving a lot of room for pancreas. pancreas, pancreas. Alrighty. After the pancreas, then we can start to work on our large intestine. Large intestine is interesting. I find that the outside edge of the ear, although we could map it here, I find that it really likes to stick to that cave because it kind of curves just like the intestines curve. So I find that the ascending colon on the right ear tends to stick into that cavum concha, that larger cave. And then it wraps around the other side and goes down that same cave. And if we wanted to do sigmoid rectum, just like that. See how it kind of S's around just like the colon? Okay. Then we have all of these small intestine reflexes, as well as reproductive, as well as urinary, just everything in this cavum concha space. Just all of that. Bowel of the ear is the bowel of the body. Another doctrine of signatures kind of in favor of this method of mapping. Versus all of this stuff through here would be muscular spine, hip territory. Then we have just the esophagus that we wanted to redo as well. Esophagus would be the stomach reflex to zone 1, so traversing the helix right up there. Fabulous, and that is how we finish up our mapping with the ears. I hope that you have enjoyed this digestive mapping section, and we'll get on to the other aspects of this course.